Welcome to the Gifts from the Edge podcast, where you are about to meet parents and professionals, educators and entrepreneurs who have taken the path less traveled, and by doing that, have made all the difference. Now it's time to step out of the ordinary. Here's your host, Andrew Lord.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Gifts from the Edge podcast. Andrew Lord here. Very excited to connect with you again today, and very excited to introduce you to our next guest, who is Dr. Jean Clinton, a clinical professor from the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster University in Ontario, Canada. Dr. Clinton was appointed as an education advisor to the Premier of Ontario and the Minister of Education back in 2014, all the way through to 2018. She's a trainer in Dr. Bruce Perry's neurosequential model, works intensively with Michael Fullan. She's been a member of the Mind Up Scientific Advisory Board, a fellow of the Child Trauma Academy, 0 to 3 Academy fellow since 2013. I could go on and on. She is an amazing wealth of experience as a career spanning more than 35 years of helping children and young people. And we are privileged to be able to connect with her today and listen to some of her wisdom, some of the things that she's brought back from the edge in helping children in their learning and growth. Dr. Jean, absolute privilege. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Andrew, and thank you for that very kind introduction. You know, there's lots of stuff that I've done, but your warmth in introducing it is greatly appreciated. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here and speak with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. And there's even more on this list we could have gone through, but I want to dive straight into some of these questions. Now, as our listeners know, the podcast is all about the edge, and that's a metaphor for someone stepping off the beaten path, going and doing something a little bit different, and bringing some wisdom back from there. It takes courage to do that, and you've definitely got some wisdom to share with us today. But when I first heard you speak, I heard you talk about a different type of edge. I heard you talking about a different type of metaphor, a not so positive edge. And you used the term upstreamers in that metaphor. Can you unpack that just a little bit for us, please?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as I think about the edge, Andrew. I think I've had the privilege in my 35, 38-year career of being able to work very directly with not only children and families, but also community in a very deep and significant way, to look at how can we create the conditions in the very first place for all kids to do well. So as a child psychiatrist, I spent many years with kids who are downstream. They're in that river of distress and despair and disorder. And I realized, partly because I've had fantastic mentors, that we really need to be thinking about how can we be way, 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 way up the stream, preventing kids from falling in that river in the first place. And so my work in community is very much a part of that. My thinking about how do we create the conditions, the competencies in children, but also in the adults and the ecosystem around children, so that they have what they need in order to not just get by, but actually flourish and thrive. So I'm an upstreamist. Periodically, Andrew, I'm a little bit of an extremist, particularly when I'm talking to bloody government who's not listening. But yeah. So that's the concept of upstream.
Yeah, wow. And so the changes that you see need to happen, is that primarily in schools? Like, is that where you do most of your work? Because I guess schools are at the coalface of making change for young people.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. At this point in time, I have the absolute privilege of working with a dear friend and colleague, a massive thinker in educational leadership and reform, called Michael Fullan. So, given my my connection with Michael, we're thinking very deeply in education systems. But I have a deeply rooted connection to the early years. I've been I started a preschool assessment group for children under 6 at the hospital that I worked in, and so it's not just about the formal education system, but also the how do we think about, how do we imagine the world for our littlest ones, the 0 to 6. So I've got two very big areas of work that I do.
Okay, well, let's just talk a little bit about the early years, because I know a lot of my my listeners are parents of with kids in that season of life. And I've got here, the crucial role that relationships, belonging, and connectedness play in learning and growth. Can you tell us a little bit more about those things? How do they shape a young person's development, and what can parents do to cultivate that environment?
Oh, Andrew, what a fabulous! I love your thinking and your questions. So, I think all of us, I have 5 children and 8.5 grandchildren. And so I think what we all want is for our children to do well. But as adults in children's lives, we have to examine, well, what do we mean by do well? And at the superficial level, we want them to do okay in school. We want them to get along and learn well. But I'm of a mindset that we need to support parents in thinking more deeply about what is their role, what is their kind of North Star when it comes to raising their children. And surely it's about creating the conditions where your little ones are going to be good citizens to the world, to each other, to themselves. And so that really requires thinking deeply about what is the world that I want to see for my little ones, and how do I create their competencies to be able to be in that world. What we know is families, parents really worry about, are my kids ready for school? Do they know their numbers? Do they know this and that and this and that? But the research is crystal clear that when kids enter formal schooling with the ability to get along with others, the ability to share, the ability to care about the others, these what we call social and emotional, which I call foundational, essential life skills. When they have those, they soar. They do far better than the kids who can read and write but can't get along. And I think we really need to talk to parents. And I'm sure parents the world over will say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when you're busy in the world, the chaos of raising little ones with the raise them well, feed them, do the laundry, tidy the house, all of that, you don't necessarily get a chance to be reflective about what's your role, what's your heart's desire for your little ones, and how does your heart's desire for your little ones actually match how you interact with them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And as you're saying this, I'm sort of putting my coach's hat on just for a moment. And for everyone listening now would be, I know that some people listen to this, in the gym or on the road, and you may not be able to do this, but if you are in a space where you can grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and Dr. Jean has just asked some really insightful, brilliant questions. If you could jot down, it only takes maybe 5 minutes to tap into some of those deeper parts of yourself. If you're hopefully listening to this podcast in a place where you've got 5 minutes, write some of those things down, and perhaps, you know, talk about those later with your partner, because just a little trigger like that can be cascade into all sorts of other conversations in the future, which can change things down the line. So thank you so much for sharing that. You used the term "do well," and that's a term that's sort of packed with assumptions. And most of my work in education has been in the you know, the high school space. We call it secondary education here in Australia. And a lot of the challenges that I think that I've had to deal with is that I've worked in community, but I've also worked with worked with teachers as well. And teachers come to the table with a whole bunch of different assumptions about what they think their responsibilities are and what they think kids should know. And often it's really leaning towards vocational knowledge, you know, getting a good job. It's an economically driven mindset. And parents, more probably aligned with what you've said, want their kids to be happy. They want their kids to be active citizens. They want their kids to be participating, thriving members of a community. How can leaders, and I guess I'm bundling teachers and educators in with that term leaders, but how can leaders shift their thinking more towards a holistic perspective of education?
Wow, again, just such an important question, and in our COVID world that we're in, so very, very relevant. You know, there are so many issues that young people are experiencing just now, and I think the idea that resonates for me as leaders is to think about, what is your spirit work? What is your thinking about the moral purpose of education? You know, here in North America, there's a leadership guru called Simon Sinek, Sinek, and he talks about, when we have a good idea and focus on the why of what we do, you know, the how of what we do and the what of what we do is important. But when you've got that North Star understanding of the why are we in the business of public education? Why are we in the business of education in the first place? And if we limit it to the covering of content, the knowing of content, then we're like carpenters. You know, here's the product. This is how we make it into this particular end, and we go there. But if we think about education as about human development and flourishing, then you see yourself more as a gardener, about creating the ecosystem, the conditions for all kids, and I have to say, hugely important, all staff to thrive and to flourish. So it's a mindset shift. It's not about grit and perseverance and that kind of mindset. I love Carol Dweck's work, but it really is about, what is the moral imperative and the grammar of schooling that we want to see in this day and age. And it's very dramatically different from what it was in the past. We need to be thinking about kids being ready for life, but living life as they're getting ready for life, you know, living it in their everyday interactions with their educators and with their peers and with their family and with their coaches. So it's not all about just turning out well in the future, but experiencing deep, passionate engagement in the world of today.
That's great. I'm just thinking out loud, you know, on some of those things that you said before about parents and in the busyness of life, being able to take some time to reflect on the world that they wanted to create. And I'm guessing for leaders of schools who have the opportunity to create time and space for their staff to have this sort of reflection, and even going the next level of facilitating this sort of reflection of what's your moral purpose, what's your calling, you know, in this place of education, I think is a really powerful thing to do. Thank you
And
for sharing that.
yeah, and Andrew, you know, it's not just pie in the sky. I have a lovely connection with a superintendent of a high school district in California, Mike Matsuda in Anaheim, Anaheim Union District High Schools. And so there's about 30,000 students from grade 7 to grade 12. And as you very well know, the US has a mad connection to high stakes testing. And what Mike and his team and throughout his organization has said, you know, those high stakes testing, sure, okay, we need to do it. They're the standards we need to follow. But what we're really importantly focusing on is kids developing their sense of themselves, their sense of their relationship to others, and their ability and desire to give back to the community. So they've got Unstoppable You is is one of the kind of taglines that they have. So do they meet the expectations that the state says? They absolutely do. But they have educators who are mentored as they come into the new schools. They're mentored by other educators who say, this is what we're in the business of: human development, compassion. They focus on 5 C's of 5 competencies, and compassion is a very, very big one around their focus. So, you know, if you can do that in Disneyland, like Anaheim is right where Disneyland is in California, man, oh man, where else on the planet can you do it? It takes absolute leadership that says there is another way. We can not throw out the baby with the bathwater, but we can find the way to walk the path with these dual expectations. But what we need to see is that our kids come out good at learning and good at life.
Yeah. And I love how you say there is a way, because just that hope that it can be done, you know, that we don't have to abandon everything that we've got in the system. We can sort of bring some of these new ideas into the system. I'd love to share with you a little bit about one of my programs. It's called Adventure Quest. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. So I'll just explain it a little bit. So we have a group of children, usually around 18 children who are aged from 10 to 15, and we go into wild spaces. So, you know, the bush, the beach, all sorts of different wild spaces, because I love being in nature. I think nature has a therapeutic effect of its own without me having to do anything. And then we have activities that based on the curriculum. So we do cover knowledge. We do cover our, you know, the things that are well recognized all around the world: math, science, English, history, geography, you know, all of those sorts of things. But I sort of package that into fun activities. So there's usually a puzzle to solve, or a game to play, or, you know, an adventure to go on. And so it's loosely based on Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, where we move through different cycles, and there's trials, there's crisis, and I teach them about the hero's journey so that when they hit the hard part, we have a language to be able to say, you know, this is the trial, this is the crisis, and it's good because then they know what's coming next. And so it works like that in a daily system, but it also works like that in a bigger system, in that the 10 weeks that they go on the journey, usually week 5 and 6 are really hard. You know, there's sometimes even tears because of the challenges that these guys are going through, you know, climbing mountains and that sort of thing. So there's that aspect of it, but we also look at character as well. So I also teach directly. You mentioned Carol Dweck there before. We also teach some of these mindset principles directly, but these mindset principles have a lot more relevance when you're halfway up a mountain and your legs are hurting. You can it's a context to be able to talk about resilience and those sorts of things, and it makes a lot more sense. And then we also add in other things like hiking, swimming, survival, cooking, building, just a lot of practical life skills that kids love getting their hands dirty with as well. So yeah, that's called the Young Heroes Adventure Quest. And I'm just wondering if you feel that it's on the right track with some of these things that you're sharing as well, or if you had any advice, ways to tweak it, or other thoughts to consider.
Oh, Andrew, I think I think it's brilliant. I think that there's been lots of research looking at what actually motivates us. And Daniel Pink wrote a wonderful book called Drive, and he talks about mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And as I hear you describe this hero's quest, and by the way, I love Joseph Campbell. I think he was a wise man ahead of our time.
Hmm.
But when you think about that map, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, what you're describing is the experience of I can do hard stuff and I can get through hard stuff. And man, oh man, is that not what our kids need to have as a mantra? I can do hard stuff. I can get through hard stuff. And that not only are they autonomous, that they can do it on their own, but I'm sure in your program they learn that you are even greater when you do it in partnership with others, when you solve together. So it's kind of like collective autonomy is so important. And then the purpose. You're describing these young people who have this magnificent opportunity to explore and dig deep into, well, what the heck is all of this thing called living and looking after our planet all about? So I think it's a magnificent. The only thing I would add to it is, can you bring it to Canada, please?
I'd love to. That sounds fantastic, and I'm sure my wife would be into that idea as well.
Yeah.
One other program that we run is called Project Space, and this one's probably more more widely accepted because there's other schools like the big picture schools and that focus on project-based learning. Project Space, though, is a very individualized form of project-based learning. So the first part of the course is called Who Do You Think You Are? And we spend time doing personality profiling and all sorts of different activities, mind mapping, all of those sorts of things for a young person to explore their identity, explore what are their interests, what are their likes. And then from that, they choose a project, and then we teach them, the planning tools and the practical skills of doing the business of work. And we map it so that we've got math, science, English, history, geography, again, all covered throughout the process. And some projects cover those different topics better than others. And I have to map it because I work with a lot of homeschoolers, and they want to see, it's their responsibility to tick those boxes. So they want to see that part done. But at the end of it, there's a showcase, and the showcase is kind of equivalent to the crisis moment in Adventure Quest, where there's sometimes a little bit of anxiety connected to it, because they have to take this thing that's close to their heart, that they love, but they have to shift their focus and then become other-centered. Initially, the program's arguably self-centered kind of a program because it's all about themselves, but then they have to move to Showcase, where it's an other-centered giving out, and they have to learn how to communicate their message to other people. So I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that? I know other people have said, that putting kids in an environment where there's, where they have to do a presentation can be less positive. But I'm just interested to hear your opinion on that sort of a model of learning as well.
Yeah, no, again, Andrew, I love it. I think that it's so important that, so from a couple of different perspectives. One, your last comment about having kids present. I think that it is so important that kids go beyond their comfort zone. Like, stress is okay. It's good to get stress. It's not good to get too much stress that you can't manage or you can't predict. But good stress teaches you, man, that was so hard, but I did it. I accomplished it. And that's what builds resilience. So I think it's really important to push not just children but adults beyond their comfort zone. I think the other thing is to really think about thinking. The fancy term is metacognition, but I don't think our education system has a focus on thinking about thinking. And as we think about the future that our young people are coming into, they're going to need to be able to think about their thinking, because they're not, the skills that we think they might need may not be what is required. But if you teach them about inquiry, and so when I think about project-based learning, what I think about is it needs to absolutely be about inquiry. It needs to be about what can I learn? What's my hypothesis? What can I find to be true? What did I learn here? Because that is how we deal with complex social situations. So that idea of project and inquiry-based learning. And then, I would include in it, I have a dear friend, Peter Senge, who wrote The Fifth Discipline. And, he talks about the ladder of inference. So helping young people, and I would love to see if this is included in your projects, Andrew, that helping young people say, there's a whole bunch of facts out there, but I zero in on certain ones, and those facts influence my assumptions and my conclusions and my beliefs, and this is how I act. But if we can have an education system that helps little ones, young people, stop and think about, oh, are they the only facts? Are there other facts? What's influencing my belief? Where are my blind spots? What am I inferring from this? Man, we would see a world that is far more peaceful than what we see now.
Deep thinking, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Jean, it's been so good to spend some time with you, and you're a wealth of knowledge and way more than we can cover in this short space of time that we have available. But you do have a book. You have a book that people can go out and buy and get deeper into some of these concepts. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and also where people can go find that?
Yeah. So thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I constructed a book called Love Builds Brains by myself, Jean Clinton. And I have a very, very dear friend, who my friend Joyce Bellis from Tall Pine Press. And so they've got this tiny little publishing company. And Joyce heard me speak many, many years ago, and she said, Jean, we need to get this out of just you speaking to people to on paper, on print, and get it out. And I'll be making it into an audible, a book on tape. And so what she and her husband, Ken, my brilliant, beautiful friends, they recorded 10 of my speeches, 10 of my, talking to people. I don't like thinking about speeches, but my interactions with people. And then Joyce and I sat in her study and transcribed those into the written word. And so I talk about connection and attachment and the adolescent brain and stress and self-regulation and the digital world. And so it's a compilation of many of my thoughts. And we also have a study guide we've developed now for reflective questions. As you're reading it, how about thinking about this? So Love Builds Brains is built on the very, very real fact that we now know more about how the brain develops than we ever knew. And that when we have safe, secure, nurturing relationships with children, all the way up to 18 and beyond, actually, then the actual architecture of their brain gets built. The architecture, literally how the connections form, how they get stronger, how they build networks, get built and through our relationships and through our connections. We thought for a very long time that genes were the blueprint. And, you got good genes, good for you, bad genes, so sorry, too bad, so sad. And that just is not the case. The genes are listening to the environment and get turned on, they get dimmed down or shone up, depending on what the actual experience is, like talking, singing, reading, all of those things. Love literally builds brains.
Wow. Yeah, that's so cool. And you've captured it there well in the title. I'm going to put a link so that people can go and get that book. I'll be definitely getting it myself. Can't wait for the Audible to come out as well. I've just put my Audible out and it's a bit of a process. So I wish you all the best with that. I think it's easier when you're in Canada because they have distributors over there, not so much in Australia. But thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. I can't wait to share this with our community. But Jean, it's wonderful to chat with you.
Oh, Andrew, what a delight it's been to spend this time with you. I so deeply appreciate it and love your programs. I love your thinking on the edge about what young people need to survive, thrive, and actually flourish. So deep thanks from me.
Wow, what a great interview, super rich and insightful. Coming back again to one of my super passions, which is education, which, as she said, is really about building capacity in human beings, right? It's not about the facts and the figures that we so often make it. It's about helping young people and adults to become the best humans that they can possibly be. And that's obviously what I'm all about. So it's so encouraging to hear Dr. Jean share those ideas as well. And I really am grateful to her for spending that time with us. When I recorded this late last year, I was really busting to share it, but I felt it would be wise to release it early in the new year, the new school year, when hopefully you're looking for some powerful ideas and insight on how you can set your child up for success in 2024. So make sure you go and grab your copy of Love Builds Brains. I've just put a link to that below if you're listening to this on the podcast page. I've also put a link to Dr. Jean's website so you can go and check out some of her other material. I want to make a special mention, special thanks to Emma for recommending Dr. Jean to me. I know it took a long time to make this happen, but I'm very grateful that you made that recommendation. That's all from me for today. If you're getting ready for this new year of education and learning, please remember what it's all about. Make sure you go and check out our new page, our new home for all of our different educational programs. It's called educationrevolutions.au. I'll put a link below just for that one as well. And if you ever want to reach out and have a chat about unlocking your true potential through education or coaching or one of my courses, just use the booking link on my website. I'd love to help you take that next step into your greatness. That's all from me for today. Bye for now.